let's get a little bit more current. I don't know if anybody has heard this before, but there's this small 900-page book called Project 2025. And in one of the chapters of that 900-page book, it calls for dismantling the Department of Education. Um, I think you might have some thoughts about that, John.
Look, it's incredibly distressing, painful, and terrifying. Distressing and painful because I know the people, because we worked with them. Just wonderful civil servants, people who were themselves teachers and principals and student affairs administrators in higher education, and they've committed years of their lives to working at the department so that they can help kids and schools and communities, and they've been treated horribly. It's terrifying because the department has such an important role. Now, there are 4 core functions of the department. 1, get resources to vulnerable kids. The Title I program that sends money to schools serving low-income students. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act funding, which allows for students with disabilities to get the services they need. That funding is in jeopardy. It's in jeopardy because the people who administer those programs are no longer there. There are half as many people working at the department today as there were on January 20th. And it's also in jeopardy because I think the administration's clear agenda is to cut these vital programs. The second major function is our federal financial aid system. Nearly half our entering students at SUNY are Pell Grant students. Right? Pell Grants have made it possible for generations of Americans to access higher education. The entry point to that is the FAFSA, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. If that breaks, it's a disaster for higher education, but more than that, it's a disaster for our economy, for our national security, for the health of our democracy. The student loan system makes it possible for low and middle income Americans to access higher education. That too starts with the FAFSA. So I'm very worried about that system breaking. And they say it'll all be fine, but they've laid off, again, so many of the people who worked on the FAFSA and on the federal student aid system. The third area of work for the department is civil rights enforcement. And I always remind people of the Norman Rockwell painting of Ruby Bridges, right? And you can picture it almost immediately, right? It's such an iconic painting. And in the center, of course, is Ruby Bridges, but who's around her? U.S. Marshals. Why are U.S. Marshals around her? Because New Orleans and Louisiana did not want to respect her civil rights, did not want to deliver a quality education to her. Right? That took federal intervention. And so when you take away the people who do civil rights enforcement, that means if you're a victim of discrimination on the basis of race or sex or disability, you won't have someplace to go. They received over 20,000 complaints last year, a significant number of them from families of kids who aren't getting the disability services they're entitled to. Where will they go? Then the fourth area of work for the department, I know this is a passion for you, Denise, and for Ed Truss, data. Research, information. How can we fix things if we don't know how we're doing? And it's the department's job to give us that information, things like the National Assessment of Educational Progress that we use to understand how we're doing. And also, it's how we know where we're doing well, so we can go replicate those things. So all of that is under threat. And, when you combine the layoffs at the department, the grants that have been canceled, and you combine that with the budget proposals from the administration, what you see is really an assault on K-12, on higher education, on the idea that education should be a national imperative. And I think that is very dangerous.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, John. I'm going to get one more question in, and then we want to open it up to you all. I know that there are some really burning questions for John. John, you've been involved in education at every conceivable level. Based on that, as a teacher, as a school leader, as the head of the state, as the deputy secretary, as the U.S. secretary, now as chancellor, head of Ed Truss, what do you see? Tell us, what are, in your mind, what are the keys to success? How would you define student success? It doesn't just come down to grades and testing. it's about other things as well, as a well-balanced student who does academically. But share with us your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I think about this a lot in my current job and have throughout my career. I hope that we equip all of our students with the skills to thrive, right? And that's the skills to be successful at the next level, right? If you're a middle school teacher, you want your student to be prepared to be successful in high school. If you're a high school teacher, you want them to be prepared to be successful in college or careers. But we want more than just skills, right? We also want them to be prepared to be good citizens. And we're counting on young people to inherit our democracy and keep it going, which feels more fragile now than it has maybe in many decades. So we need them to be prepared to disagree agreeably, to listen, not just to wait your turn so you can say what you think, but actually to hear the other person and to think through what's motivating them. We need them to have empathy. We need them to understand current events and also to be invested in community. Right? Those are things that we can cultivate in schools from K-12 through higher education. We also want to prepare our students to live fulfilling lives. The same things we think about as parents, right? We want our kids to be happy. We want them to have an appreciation for the arts and music. We want them to have an appreciation for the outdoors and nature, and a reason to think we ought to keep this, planet of ours going a little longer, right? So there's so much that we want for our students, and I hope that we all want for other people's children what we would want for our own. And one of the things that worries me with these attacks on public education is I fear that underlying it is a sense that people are less worried about other people's children, that that's something others need, and they're going to only look out for their own. And that is very dangerous, because you cannot build walls high enough around your Tesla-funded mansion to separate the future of your children from the future of the children down the road, down the street, in the next town over, on the Native American reservation, in Puerto Rico, right? Like, all of our children's fates are all bound up together. And so we all have a stake in ensuring a great education for every child.
Amen.